Hello, my extraterrestrial friends. I heard that you're interested in hiding in the US, and in order to fit in, there's a lot to know about the government and the foundation for how our country is run. The basis of our government was formed in 1788 when the Constitution was ratified. This is the supreme law of the land and is the basis for our government. Our government has one federal government responsible for the whole country as a whole, and each state also has its own government, and there are also even local governments for all the little cities and counties throughout each state. There are 7 articles of the Constitution which set up all 3 branches of the government in order of importance to the framers. The first article creates the legislative branch, which grants all lawmaking and legislative powers to the Congress of the United States, broken into 2 parts, the Senate and the House of Representatives. This was seen as the most powerful and important branch because it was closest to the people, who vote for new congressmen every couple years. The second article sets up the executive branch. This branch is headed by the President of the United States, who is very powerful, much more powerful than the executive branch was in the Articles of Confederation, which was a big issue at the time. The third article sets up the judicial branch, which was in charge of interpreting the law and was not very powerful at the time, not nearly as powerful as it is now, and also set up the Supreme Court of the United States and the current court system. The fourth defines the state powers in relationship to each other. The fifth article allows for amendments to the Constitution to be made. The Sixth Amendment makes the Constitution the supreme law of the land and more powerful than any other laws that take place in the states or the local governments. The 7th article states the number of states that were needed to ratify the Constitution, as well as a list of the names of the Constitution's signers. The first 10 amendments of the Constitution are called the Bill of Rights, which sets up the basic rights all American citizens are given at birth or once they become a citizen. The First Amendment is one of, if not the most important amendment in the Constitution, and gives the right to freedom of speech, press, petition, religion, and assembly. This means that the government cannot persecute you or take away these rights for any of those reasons, with some exceptions, of course. Another very important right given in the Constitution comes from the Fifth Amendment, which gives the right to a quick and fair trial, also known as due process. This helps support the rights of the accused. There are 27 amendments to the Constitution. However, here are some of the most important ones. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery in the U.S. and freed all slaves in the South. The 14th Amendment helped reinforce the rights of citizens to ensure that all citizens are equally protected. The 19th Amendment gave women the right to vote in America, which was big for the suffrage movement at the time. And finally, the 22nd Amendment finally spelled out that no president may serve more than 2 terms in office or a third under special circumstances, to allow a maximum of 10 years to prevent any president from staying in power too long. In order to elect someone to be a member of Congress, there are a couple requirements. In order to be eligible to get elected, one has to be at least 25 years of age, be a U.S. citizen of 9 or more years, and also they must be a resident of the state that they are running in. Each state has 2 senators, which are elected by everyone in the state, and the candidates who receive the most votes win. For the House, it's a bit different. Each state is given a certain amount of congressional districts based on their population, and each district gets 1 representative. Senators serve 6-year terms where it is staggered, so 1/3 of the Senate is elected every 2 years, and the members of the House are re-elected every 2 years. The candidate that receives the most votes wins. Every 4 years, the President of the United States is elected. Being possibly the most powerful person on the planet, there are a few qualifications. They must be at least 35 years old, they must be a U.S. citizen, and have lived in the U.S. for 14 years. In order for the president to be elected, they must win a majority of the electoral college votes. Each state is given an amount of electoral votes based on the population. The president has many jobs, however, his roles can be broken down into a couple different hats, as they're called. The president is the chief citizen, commander-in-chief, chief diplomat, chief executive, chief of state, chief of party, chief administrator, and chief legislator. The president is in charge of the military, diplomacy amongst other world leaders, the economy, and the executive branch, his own party, and also he's in charge of being a good role model for the United States citizens. Congress and the legislative branch are in charge of making federal laws in the U.S. A law can be introduced into the floor in either the House or the Senate. It must be approved by both houses with a simple majority. Once it passes the house it starts in, it must then go through the other house, and then the president must sign it to become a federal law. The U.S. government runs on a federalism system where there is a federal government, and then each state has their own government, and then there's also local governments for little cities, counties, and whatnot in every state. The federal government is giving many powers, like Congress collecting taxes. There are also many reserved powers, for example, like the topic of education is reserved for each state to decide the standards and laws. There are also concurrent rights. For example, both the state and federal government have the ability to tax you. The states are also denied some powers. They cannot coin money, make treaties, or declare wars. One of the most important parts of the U.S. is the court system. Is the court systems. This is where justice is served and lives are changed. The purpose for district and appellate courts are to look at the outcome of court cases and determine whether the original finding was the correct one or not. If they find the lower court's ruling was incorrect or unjust, then they may overturn the ruling. The Supreme Court is the most powerful court in the U.S. They only hear about 100 to 150 cases out of the thousands that are filed every year. They choose the most important cases, especially usually about important topics where constitutional rights are in question. They have the ability to interpret the Constitution and find laws to be in violation of the Constitution. Some of the most important Supreme Court rulings ever were Brown versus the Board of Education, which found that separate but equal was not equal, and led to the desegregation of schools, and Roe v. Wade about abortions was, of course, later reversed, and now the state have the right to choose. Those are just some important ones. Now that you know a little bit more about the U.S. and how the government works, I hope that you choose to hide here.